Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, where we will be talking about rentals, the biggest opportunity that dealers overlook. So this is going to be an awesome value-packed session with proven strategies from three people who have been in the equipment dealer industry for decades. But before I hand over the floor to our speakers, there's just a few housekeeping items that we need to cover. So first, today's webinar will be recorded, and we'll email you a link to the recording after the webinar, so you can keep an eye out for that. And secondly, if you have any questions, we do encourage you to use the chat button. You can find it at the top of the screen. It's that little double chat bubble. We encourage you to use that because we would love this to be an open roundtable discussion. If you want to submit questions using the Q&A box, that's the one beside it with the little question mark, you can use that as well. And our speakers will do their best to address any questions throughout the webinar or at the end. So don't be afraid to drop something in the chat or in the Q&A box at any time. And finally, a survey will pop up at the end of the webinar, and we would appreciate it if you took a couple of seconds to answer it because your feedback is very valuable to us. So without any further ado, I would like to hand the floor over to Lloyd, Michael, and John.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and thank you everybody for attending today and giving us a little bit of your time. This is very much open discussion. Why is DIS hosting this? Honestly, it's because we've got 40 plus years of experience looking after dealers and across multiple markets, and some of these already use rental extensively, and some should be looking at doing more rental, which is kind of the whole point of today. So background on me, and then I'll turn it over to John and Michael. I've been looking after dealers from software sales side of it and running sales teams and organizations 31 years now. And most of that is in heavy equipment space. So that's my background. John, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Lloyd. I'm just old. For about 35 years, I've been kicking around here with a number of different software companies and dealers. I lost count after spending time in over 500 individual dealerships across North America. But yeah, I always have a perspective and happy to share it.
Michael?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to say I'm young, but I'm certainly young in comparison. 35 years old for anyone who cares. But I've spent my entire life family-owned and operated business, and then kind of graduated from a couple of different things, and spent some time doing entrepreneurial projects and in the military, and then got a couple degrees, came back, ran an organization, been doing the controller thing, the CFO thing, the CEO thing for a dealership, and been in dealerships my whole life. So a lot of peer groups, was a top 10 Bobcat dealer for 15 years, and grew our dealership specifically from 1 to 5 stores for 8 years, grew by 20% every year in every department, and specifically rental obviously was our big success story there. And so, that's the experience I bring to the table, and hopefully can take some things that other people who were older than me gave me good advice that allowed us to accelerate while I was young. And so I hope to pass some of that on today.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
We only have 3 slides with a bunch of discussion topics on it. So this is very unstructured, discussion-oriented webinar today. And the first topic, and again, I'm going to turn this over to Michael and John, and I'll let anybody that's attending read the slides, but realistically, rentals is an opportunity. If you haven't already recognized that, that's the purpose why we're here today. So I know, John, you had a comment on cyclical when I created the.
Well, I do, but I got to get my first shot in because Michael's not old enough to remember Marsha. But in this case, it's rentals. So I had to go back and look it up. But I think the first big rental initiative started in with a program called Rental 2000 that was put out by the AED. And that was during the time period when, there was some really significant concern that dealerships in the traditional format weren't going to survive. And in fact, like so many pendulums, it swung to the other side. and said we're all going to be rental houses. And that's when we had Cat Rents and Volvo Rents and Nation Rent and all of these things into a boom market. But I think the most interesting thing, everything in virtually any business can be tied to a cycle. It's just a matter of recognizing the pattern. And I'm not in disagreement that it's an important thing, and I'm not in disagreement that it's important right now. But I kind of wanted to go back to, and I guess what I'll ask Michael to elaborate on is why is it important now? Because historically, it's usually it usually comes at a time where there's an indication of a slowdown, of economic uncertainty, threat of a recession. So historically, if you go back and look at the times when rental has really started to upswing in the dealerships, it's always been strictly based on economics. But I think there's got to be more to it this time than just, hey, there's a challenging economy. From a customer's perspective, but from a dealership's perspective, what is it about now that makes it more critical than anything else, Michael?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons. Like when I started tabulating and kind of formulating as we prepared for this, I was like, wow, there are, I can't think of reasons not to today. And that's not like just a shock and awe statement. That's the reality. I think the one that bubbled to the top of my list that not a lot of people think about is competitive pressure. Like rentals has accelerated, right? You talked about 20 years ago they were kicking people and saying, hey, you should get into this or you're going to be left behind. But more and more dealers have jumped into it to the point where if you're in your market and you're not doing it, you're getting left behind at this point. Is I think fair to say, because when we look at any market, you're going to have, let's say there's 6 OEMs, within 20 miles of each other, right? 2 or 3 of those are going to rent. It's just that simple, right? If there's 6 or 7, you're going to have 2 or 3 that are renting. And why you wouldn't want to offer your customers the opportunity to not just come and buy a piece of equipment from you, but maybe they don't have the need to add another machine to their fleet, but maybe they want to just expand for one particular project or a certain season of the year. And if you don't offer that to your customers, and you might think, oh, well, I offer that in partiality, we do it case by case, and we really just don't advertise rental. If you're not advertising it, they're not thinking of you as their partner for it. And so it could be that existing customers and long-term clients that you have are already satisfying that need by going to somebody else. So it's kind of that competitive pressure and that access to new customer market segments that I felt like is the untalked about reason, at least for getting into this. Now, I don't want to monologue for too long here, John, but I do have we're in business to make money as dealers, right? And something that I always struggled with, any dealership I've ever been a part of or ever talked to or ever done consulting with, when they don't want to do rental, a lot of times I hear like, well, rental's just so much work. I don't want to deal with that business. I'd rather just sell the piece of equipment. And yet that same dealer will say, when you ask them, how do you go sell the piece of equipment? They'll say, well, you got to have a great relationship. You got to get up in the middle of the night and you got to go take care of that customer. You got to have 24/7 service. You're already doing all the same things. You're already activating the trucks. You're already sending out the replacement machines. You're already doing all of this, except instead of charging your customers for it at this premium service that you provide and that 5-star service you provide, you're just not having a dedicated fleet for it, and you're cutting yourself off the most profitable piece of it, which is when they want a machine and they're happy to pay for it, they can just call you and you can deliver for them. So really, it's an extension of service for your customers. And I feel like, if you asked me why now, it's that you're not competing with the neighbor next door. You're not competing with the market, just your local market. You're competing with what are people seeing in the overall industry. Given
So
that everything's prevalent.
So that's where I think you're spot on, because I can keep going back to the good old days, but the fact of the matter is the world shifts and changes underneath us, and
Yeah.
I think the customer expectation now, in a lot of cases, and in most cases, exceeds what the traditional dealership can deliver, not just in rental, but in a lot of places. I was driving last week on a country road, saw the cutest little old hotel you can possibly imagine. And instead of talking about their great breakfast or, the beautiful surroundings, they had a sign on the front that said free Wi-Fi. And
Yeah.
it just made me think, because the answer is I never ask anybody if they have Wi-Fi anymore. My assumption going in as a customer is I'm checking into a hotel, I'm going to get Wi-Fi. And I think from a customer perspective, from an end user customer perspective, they're looking for innovative solutions to their problems, whether it's capital expenditures or they don't have the money for equipment or they need increased downtime protection. There's so many reasons that they do it. And I think you're right. I think if you're going to compete in today's market, you've got to be prepared to offer them whatever it is they need and do it accurately.
Yeah, I think, something I was just thinking about as you were saying that is, I remember a couple dealers that I had done consulting with in the past. They had said, well, all right, we want to grow our fleet, why is it that OEMs are pushing us into this? And, I don't want my OEM, all they care about is more machine sales. Well, the flip side of that and the inverse argument of that is also true, right? We as dealers, all we really care about is machine sales too, right? Like we're just trying to move more equipment, sell more product, make more money, right? With the same staff and the same overhead. And, something that having that rental fleet allows you to do is sell more equipment. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it's there for. I've always found it interesting. There's so many dealer principals out there that are into the concept of, they're businessmen, they're entrepreneurs, and they're always betting with their money, right? They're always putting money into sometimes real estate, sometimes their dealership, sometimes more market funds, stocks, portfolio, you name it, and yet they're not betting on themselves, right? With the rental fleet. The rental fleet is an equity parking lot that will print you money. It's one of the highest ROI businesses that you can have, and you can park your own investment portfolio, your beta, on yourself by putting that money directly into that fleet. It's sitting on the ground, and if the whole thing goes kaputs and you can't rent to anyone, well, gosh, isn't it a good thing that one of your other businesses is selling equipment?
So that nice segue. That leads into my question for you, because historically, what you'll find is a dealership that rents or a rental house that sells. Is there a good balance cut off? I mean, can a traditional dealership evolve into having rental play a significant enough portion where they can consider themselves a traditional dealership and a rental house at the same time?
Absolutely. So a couple real life examples. So I'll start with we opened a store. If anyone knows where Horseheads, New York is, you feel
Been
free to
there.
look it up on the map. And there's a prison there and not much else, right? And it's right outside Elmira. And the market is not a market that you'd look at and be like, oh my gosh, I want to go open a rental fleet there, park $1 million in fleet, and just see what it does, right? That's not the concept. But we did have the opportunity to have a store there. And so when we opened it up, we had a lot of, actually, we acquired it from somebody else. And looks like our
Sorry, guys.
presentation here is messed up. No problem, Lloyd.
No, I just messed up for some reason. We're back.
No problem. We had the opportunity to open the store, and the people that we had acquired the market from, they kind of indicated, we tried rental there, it really doesn't work, it's too small, it's the people that are there, there's too much disparity in income. It's either you're really rich or you're really poor, and so the rich are paying contractors, they're not really, and we were construction equipment, right? So the poor people, they're not doing their own projects. That was kind of the statement. And so we challenged that idea. We said, okay, well, everything we do, we set to grow by 20%. And so we parked $1 million of equipment there with no prior rental history. And in year one, you know what we saw, John? Probably what you'd expect, right? We did a little bit of marketing. We showed up at the fairs. We did the things, and we went backwards, right? You know, in terms of profitability, we had hired an individual to run that department. That's super important. And we went backwards by, I want to say it was close to $60,000. But you know what happened in that first year is we started establishing relationships with everybody who owned equipment in that same area. And what we found is when we said to them, hey, you want to buy your next piece of equipment, try a rental from us. You know, we made that rental like our do you want fries with that type thing, right? They came and did service with us. We'd say, hey, while you're in for service, we're going to send you with one of our brand new machines. You know, and we had the equipment available, so why not, right? And we were using it. In year 2, we printed $200,000 in revenue on that same fleet. We didn't change a thing. We did the same exact advertisement. It was all word of mouth, traditional marketing. And by year 3, we had printed $300,000 in profit on that fleet over the course of the 3 years. So you lose money the first year, you invest in it the second year and establish those relationships and make things move. And by year 3, you win a couple contracts that start printing you money. And that's I mean, you can look up Horseheads, New York. It's not you're not going there to do big business, right? But gosh, if I could park $1 million and print $300,000, that's a pretty good return on my investment. 10% over 3 years. I'll take that any day of the week.
So I want to take a step back. By the way, been to Horseheads, New York. I remember the store well because I was at a dealer that didn't rent that
right.
was there. So I witnessed the success story firsthand. But now let's just say I'm going to take a more conservative approach because, you know, you can't sit in front of every dealer principal and say, okay, you know what, we're going to do this. Here's our strategy. Give me $1 million. I'm going to buy $1 million worth of inventory and build a rental fleet. So, you know, to Lloyd's point on the slides is my belief is there's always an opportunity to rent what you already have. I mean, at any given point, a good salesman or a good entrepreneur is going to tell you, "Hey, listen, sorry, my truck's outside. You need it? Go ahead and rent it." I mean, they're happy to get rid of anything. Does it add a complexity, or does it still work if all you're going to do is utilize your equipment already on the lot? I mean, do you have to designate a special rental fleet?
Yeah, so there's layers there. I think. You know, it kind of harkening back to your last question with answering this a little bit, you know, if you've never rented before, can you separate that your sales identity from the fact that you're a rental store, right? Is kind of part of this question, right? Because you're really challenging and saying, you know, okay, well, can't you just get into rental with the existing fleet you have in inventory? Well, there's dealer agreement reasons why you can't do that. There's, you know, floor plan reasons why you can't do that, right? Your lenders don't want you getting involved in that. But there are so many lending opportunities out there for rental fleets. I know US Bank is a big proponent of used equipment rental, you know, in terms of the financing to get that fleet up and running. And by the way, majority of rental fleets, United Rental is a perfect example. Goodness, everyone knows who United Rental is. And they're 100% leveraged. There is not equity, right? There's no equity in that company. Everything they do is on debt. It's on bankers' money. So if you say, well, we can't afford the interest rates, you're insane because you absolutely can afford the interest rates. You can build a whole business with somebody else's money. Actually, I'm doing that right now with RentHub. But the point is that you can separate your rental business from your sales business, or you can choose to grow them together. So answering your question from before, there's a lot of value from a operational efficiency standpoint. And when you start your rental fleet to saying, you know what, my current business name is, let's just say, I don't know, DIS equipment. And that's what I go and I sell. And my business name tomorrow, I'm going to open another business that's called DIS Rentals. And that's going to be my next DBA. I'm still the same business. I'm going to report all the financials together, still want everything integrated so I don't lose seamlessness there. But my customers are going to know me as DIS Rentals. Now, there's a couple value points there. Number one, you can now sell that business off if you ever decide to as part of your portfolio because it's completely separate. Customers recognize it differently. Maybe you got a different logo. And then also from a taxability perspective, it's easier for your team to think about that now because it's totally separate. Maybe you show it a little bit differently on the financials. your operating team, right? When you separate it out, it allows your operating team. Maybe the guy has two jobs, right? His job is service coordinator for DIS equipments, but he's also your rental coordinator for DIS rents. So when someone calls him and they say, I'm looking for DIS rents, he instantly knows this is a rental call and he can put that hat on, right? If you're a smaller place. If you're a larger place, it gets easier to say, hey, your biggest customer is my rental department. So there's complexities that are simplified by separating the two. But that being said, we grew for 5 years as Bobcat of Buffalo. 5 years in the rental department. We grew every year by 20% without rebranding as Upstate Equipment. And so we didn't have that separate rent separator until then. And it was kind of organic, right? You run into different challenges. You have to remind your service team rentals your biggest customer. You have to remind your sales team rentals is the biggest customer. They're helping you sell more equipment. But yeah, I think if I haven't lost track of your original question, I think I've answered it.
Well, you might do that anyway, but I'm going to switch. I'm going to change lanes without a blinker here. And Lloyd, I don't know if it's on a slide or not, but it just came to mind when you're talking about the profitability and how people like United will leverage their entire fleet. When rental was really growing, in its hot spot in the late 2000s, early 2010. There was a fellow who ran a Hertz equipment rental company named Dan Kaplan. And he put a lot of books together on the right way to do rental. And I think the thing that stuck with me, even back from the olden days, books, Michael, they have pages in them. You could turn them. It's kind of cool. There's no Google to it, but there's an index at the back.
You can see my bookshelf behind me, John. I still read books.
One of the things that I thought was most interesting and has stuck with me for a long time is you're right, heavily leveraged. And Lloyd, I know this is a point near and dear to your heart. From just a Hertz equipment rental company, all of their absorption was made up in the day-to-day rentals, and that covered things like service and some miscellaneous parts, but just the rental to rental piece. So if you're thinking of that from a pure absorption, the question was, when do I finally make money? When do I make these gigantic returns that Michael's talking about? And the interesting part for them was actually when the equipment had turned over. So when they could put whatever their life cycle was on a piece of equipment and then be left with a tangible asset that still had a fairly significant market value. Is that still the mentality today, or has the world shifted again?
Yeah, so there are so many strategies when it comes to how you want to make money out of your rental fleet. Not having a rental fleet in a dealership today, in my opinion, is like not having your left arm, right? It's not your right arm. Right arm is sales, right? But it's just as frustrating as not having your left arm, because when you ask a question like, can you still get that big upswing on profit in year 1, year 2 if you turn over that fleet? Absolutely. That means you're a rent to sell dealership. Rent to sell is what OEM dealerships do really well, right?
And then, you guys, you just led into you've been starting to talk about what our second slide is, so I thought I would switch. Because rent to rent, rent to sell, both. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it helps when I read the slides ahead of time, right? No, I didn't. Clearly, I didn't. Rent to rent and rent to sell, I think, is what you're really getting at, right, John? You're saying, like, can you get that profit from 1, 2, 3 years in, and do you see that profit at that point, or do you see profit as you go? And I think both are true. It just depends on how you decide to strategize your fleet, because I've got dealer buddies who they're rent to rent, right? And they might be a Kubota dealer, they might be a Clark dealer, they might be a Toyota dealer, but they're going to rent that thing until the wheels fall off. And at that point, they're just scrapping it, or they're just, running it through some of them own refab shops, and they're refabbing the whole thing and then selling it certified pre-owned, right? I would say that I've seen all cases where, there's, I can think of a dealer right now, and I won't say their name because I don't know if they're cool with me sharing their strategy, but they buy 18 new machines every single year, put them into rental with the strict intent that every single one of those machines will be available to their sales guys. Their sales team knows it. that they can sell it whenever they can. They're gonna rent those machines first because they're new, right? Get great reputation with their customers because their customers get brand new machines out there on rent. They rent them for a premium. They only rent them for the premium, but whoever gets the next premium rental, they send that out. And then the sales guys can sell that whenever they want, all of the first year. If they make it to the second year, they become a part of dedicated rental fleet. So it's just a unique strategy, right? And you can take any number of years, any rules for the sales team. The most common I run into, and my favorite strategy is the 3-year turnaround. You take, a 3-year payback. The 4th year, you rent for profit and you sell it as soon as you can in that 4th year. And then you turn the whole thing around. Now, you're right that you can get a big grab on profit a lot of times in year 2, year 3, and just push that into your line. And, we could segue again and talk tax here if we wanted to, but
that's the next place I'm actually going to go anyway.
And that's
okay.
but I was going to bring it up because the benefit of the big beautiful bill for people renting is the tax write-off, right?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I think that rental and I get it, you've been with it all the time, but everybody's not always talking about it. And one of the reasons that it gets popular and I say it's got a cyclical nature to it, for people to say, hey, is this something I should take care of, is when you get into a challenging economic time. One, because the end user customer is saying, hey, I'm not prepared to invest at this point, or I don't have the resources or capital to buy the new equipment. But from a dealer's perspective, there's a depreciation piece that where they can actually depreciate that machine pretty rapidly, especially if it's renting, still recognize revenue at the same time, and then again at the end be stuck with this fully depreciated tangible asset. And I'm with you that Kaplan referred to it as a 4-year plan. So 3 years, generate 3 times revenue actually was his answer. So three times machine cost and revenue. Hopefully you're realizing some profitability in that. Fourth year, you bank everything because depreciation is gone. 5th year, it's gone. It's out of the fleet. Now, liquidated to a customer for sale? Sure. The huge rental houses, and I'm sure you know this because you vacation the same place I do down in Florida. If you want to know what rental houses do with their 4+ year inventory, just show up at a Ritchie Brothers auction sometime.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, I don't know. I don't believe it's being discounted. I've seen the prices there, but at that point, they've. I'm trying to be polite about it. Made so much money off that piece of iron that selling it becomes just a necessary product rather than hey, I've got to focus on a rent to sell side. So to Lloyd's question, the big beautiful bill mentions some of the depreciation. Do you have any experience in terms of how people look at the depreciation, how long they try to drag it out? Does it change when it's in the rental fleet as opposed to being in an inventory position?
Yeah, so many points I want to cover there. I think the first one is a part of my story. So when we first started in rental, it was 8 skid steers that we had gone to an auction and bought, right? They were garbage machines. I mean, they were bags of metal that, could move some dirt. And, so we had no idea what we were doing, right? You're buying these things and this is going back to, goodness, probably 2004, 2005 timeframe. And we had rented prior to that, but it was always our used equipment. About 35% of our business has always been used equipment, and still is to this day. And so we spent a lot of time at the auctions. I'm glad you brought it up because if you wanted to dip your toe into rental and you really wanted to see, you just mentioned 3x costing in 3 years. That's an ancient, that's boomer talk right there.
Oh, here we go. I knew it was coming.
It's that's not a thing anymore, right? You can't take your week's paycheck and go buy the house anymore, right? But I will say OEMs have gotten smarter. Dealerships have gotten smarter. The consumer has gotten a lot smarter, right, in terms of what they're willing to pay. And so everybody's educated. And when everybody's educated, there's just enough piece of the pie for everybody. And so that 3-year payback is actually, you're targeting when you're pricing rental fleet, you're trying to get a 3-year return on your original cost. So you're trying to break even in that 3 years. And then you're trying to print money in that final year. And then it'll still be worth good, to your point, good fair market value at the end of that. And you can typically turn it over after 3 years. For example, a track loader, right? After 3 years in the rental fleet, you're probably going to have 900 to 1,000 hours on it. That's a good spot to sell it, right? That's a great spot. You're going to be $30,000, $40,000 still of residual value in that machine, and you probably just ran out of warranty. So, if you're smart, you're buying with the warranty. There's so many pieces. I don't want to get sidetracked from the point that I'm making here. And that's when we started with bad machines, you can print that 3x cost that you were talking about. When you're starting with machines that are weak in nature. Now, my challenge is this. Why would you ever want to start your rental fleet when you're an OEM with something that isn't 5-star? Okay, that's just my opinion. My opinion is
what you guys didn't hit on that I wanted to bring up is that the OEMs now in today's market with the competition are more likely to help to get rental equipment out there than ever before. Especially
you talk
with new models coming up.
You talk about getting in with OEMs. Nobody likes to play the politics game, and we don't have any strings to OEMs here, so we can say what we want. Say what you will about the OEMs. They want you to buy more equipment. So use that to your advantage. When you tell them you're getting into rental, they will absolutely come up with some floor terms for you. They will absolutely cut you credits up front on those machines and help make your ROI happen. Why? Because they know that once you get a taste of the drug, you're going to be addicted and you're going to turn that fleet over again. And it's just going to help them sell more equipment. So use what you know about your OEMs instead of calling them evil for being in business and doing the same thing we do. Use that to your advantage and use it to propel your costs.
And Michael, I'm going to add to that because I know that there are OEMs right now that are looking for demo opportunities. And if you see, I need to have a demo of a new model into my rental fleet, I'm willing to bet most of them will work with you on that.
Yeah, that's a two-edged sword, Lloyd.
I know. It's tricky.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with that. They love to give you the prototypes, and then you're stuck with this friggin' paperweight that you're like, oh my gosh, I got this thing sitting out front.
You got to be careful of what you take. Agreed.
Yeah. So a quick example on that. We took a dozer. We were a Devlon dealer. We took their dozer when it first came out. We bought 2 brand new dozers. They sent them to us early. They were all excited about them, and you would send that thing out, and gosh, did that thing push. It was awesome. The customers loved it, and they couldn't get enough of it. Problem is, it wouldn't stay running longer than an hour because they couldn't figure out a battery harness. And, there was no support on it yet. So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot on the sales end because everybody that ran it loved it, but the battery would go bad. You'd be like, all right, we'll get it fixed for you. And then it'd sit in the shop for 3 weeks while you're trying to figure out that new product. So prototypes are, it's a give and a take. It's nice to get them, but also just watch what you're doing there, especially when you're an OEM and you got to support it.
Yeah. And you guys both walked around this, and I mean, my background is all analytics based more than anything, and I want to bring this up because you've walked around the 2 biggest issues in rental, which are time utilization and dollar utilization. And when I put analyze results on here, I just want to make sure that we talked about both, because you can't run a rental fleet without understanding, how much time is it sitting not renting, and when you do have it renting, is the dollar making up for the dollar invested? Is that fair? You need to have both dollar and time utilization.
I think I'm going to let John speak to that first, because I feel like John speaks better on the educational topics. And then John, after you're done, I'll kind of give my spiel on it.
Okay, so talk about an education. So the dealerships that I've helped usher through rental and been really successful, it took a major mind shift, because what they had to realize was, unlike a traditional machine inventory that's sitting there and you've got a floor plan expense, you were dealing with an unrealized revenue opportunity. So we actually had to convert them to come to the conclusion that a machine sitting there is costing you 8 hours while it's sitting there, Lloyd. And I know literally it's not, but the opportunity cost is 8 hours for every day that's sitting there that it's not rented. And so what traditionally I would do is get them hyper focused on utilization. In other words, if it's not in being fixed and it's sitting for more than 24 hours, worst case scenario, 48 hours sitting in a lot, they were used to a used equipment sales or even a new equipment sales where they would have to go out and mow the lawn around the machines, right? So the answer here was this stuff should be moving often enough, fast enough, and around enough, because they're dealing with multi-branch situations. And by using analytics, Lloyd, I could find out that I had the wrong mix of machines at store A, and store B had special projects going on. And Michael, that doesn't even get into, you talk about the Bobcat days, that doesn't even get into things like when Massachusetts did the big dig, and you couldn't rent equipment for 3 states. Because everything was on a single job site. So but I really think that dollar utilization is critical, but I think before anybody can get to that, they've got to get to time utilization. They have to understand
I'm gonna
that
throw another
clock is
concept.
running.
I agree with you, but there's the other side of the coin, which is, by the way, you've achieved 98% time utilization. Then you have a different problem. Because at that point, it's like, well, that tells me that if you're renting almost all your fleet all the time, why haven't you invested more in the fleet in that particular product?
So I push that back to Michael because I think every dealer's, sorry, Michael, but every dealer's going to have a different tolerance in terms of what they think utilization is, right? Some people want to burn the candle at both ends.
Yeah.
So what do you see?
Yeah, so I like to, I'm a huge fan of Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid, not the band. So I would say, and I don't have anything against the band, by the way, but it is what it is. The financial utilization and time utilization thing is such an overthought metric, right? Lloyd, you're absolutely correct. When 90% of your fleet is out, gosh, I would hope when you reach 60%, you realize you're losing opportunity, right? If somebody's calling you and you're not tracking your lost rentals, you're not tracking substitute and stuff, that's not what this call's about, really. This call's really more trying to just help you understand why you should be in rental if you're not. But I will say there's a whole topic to be discussed there about, you should track your re-rents, you should track your substitutions, you should track complementary machines, you should, that's the marketing portion of this, right? And how to market your fleet, and that's case by case. It's example by example. But for me, my time utilization metric was, look, if 60% of my fleet is utilized at any time, I'm looking for where I need to add, and that's by group type. Okay, so if I rent track loaders and excavators and I'm 67%, well, there's got to be 7% somewhere that I should be adding into the fleet. That means maybe 1 machine more, maybe 2 machines more. And I'm going to look at the highest utilization I have, and that's where I'm adding that next machine, because that's where I'm getting the most calls. Yep.
That's what I want your experience on, because I said I've just picked the number of 98%. I mean, if you're at 98%, you're way not invested enough in that category.
Now, again, but to John's point, that is company specific, right? There are companies out there who they want to run. They tell their employees 80% of your fleet should be out at all times, and they don't give them more fleet. They make the decision of when to add more fleet. They look at other metrics. So I would say that for time. And John, I would differ with you in the time versus financial. And here's why. For OEMs, most of them have a better chance of being successful at rent to sell than rent to rent. It's not that you have a different opportunity than a local United or Sunbelt or whatever. You have the same opportunity. The same customers looking to rent from you as rent from them. The difference is if you want to diversify from what your core benefit is. So if you're a industrial forklift or a lift truck dealer, right, you're going to focus on first making sure that your lift trucks are on rent, right? Making sure that you can do what you do really well. The second you finish with that, you should be saying, all right, the people who are renting these things from me, what should I rent to them, or what are they renting from my competitors?
Yep.
And then you expand off of that, right? And so rather than time utilization, when you start out, you should focus on financial utilization. That's your revenue that you earned divided by your original cost to place that into rental. That's all it is. And because we're trying to get to a break even, we need to know how long I need to own that for until I pay off the original cost and I start printing myself money for that department. That's all we care about. And as soon as we determine that on our core product, like for me, it was track loaders, right? On my core product of track loaders, I got 60, 70 track loaders, let's just say, and on those machines, I'm well utilized, I'm well within range, I have the metric I'm targeting. Before I got there, I had to know that with the first 3 of them, that I knew I could pay them off in 3 years. And if I knew I could pay them off in 3 years, that's awesome, because now I know I need to turn them over on year 4. Now I know that in my market, I can accomplish that metric, and now I can plan everything in the future off that 3-year plan. And so starting out, you're just trying to see how much am I getting paid back. And if you're not getting paid back, I can almost guarantee it's your marketing strategy, which isn't the topic today, but we
Well,
can talk.
And in all fairness, I mean, I know we had a huge, concept here in this meeting, but we probably got at least 2 or 3 more topics to cover. And I mean,
We
people
didn't
that are
cover
attending, if
taxes
you,
enough, I don't think. I think we should
well,
state
you're
a
right.
couple
We
things
we
on
haven't
that.
covered that, and we haven't even covered. You're going to laugh at me, but we didn't even get into topics, all sorts of what does the future hold, because there's a whole bunch. This is probably a whole other webinar on its own to
Well,
say, look, where is the
let
whole
me do
industry
this.
going?
Lloyd, if you don't mind, let me state one thing on taxes. Okay, just one
Yep.
statement. And we can do another webinar if needed or whatever. But one thing on taxes is, if you're considering getting into rental, let me ask you one question. Do you make money every year in parts, sales, and service? Because if the answer to that is yes, it most likely means your tax bracket is above 35%. It's probably fair to assume that. And if your tax bracket is above 35%, rental instantly turns you into zero tax every single year to grow your business. Every single year. It's not a question of if it will, it's a question of it will, or a statement of it will, excuse me. And so the big beautiful bill is great, but the point is you can write off 2.5 million without even looking at any other form of write-offs in your business. You can write off $2.5 million of investment into your own business instantly with a rental fleet. So you shouldn't have to pay taxes for the next 10 years if you don't want to. There's no reason to. And we could talk about that in another video or whatever, but I just wanted to
Okay.
state that if you're printing money in any of your businesses, you should have a rental fleet just to write off all the income.
Okay.
It justifies itself just by doing that.
And it's funny because we hit on multiple topics, and I know I flipped to this slide. We really don't have. We're at kind of at our time limit now, and I haven't seen, Sarah, were there any questions that have come in at all? I haven't seen any in the chat.
Yeah, I've
Go
been
ahead.
monitoring it, Lloyd. I don't. There's nothing in there, but I don't want to jump off the screen because I want to come back to what Michael was talking about, because I think this is important. We don't have to go through all these items.
No,
I guess
we don't have time.
my question to you, Michael, is what do you see? What do you see as the next big thing in rental?
Oh, that's a big question.
Okay, so let me answer it first, because I'm dying
Yeah,
to.
yeah, absolutely.
Because I think, and as much as you think of me as a boomer,
I don't. I was just teasing.
I think I think my job's always been to look forward on this stuff, and you'll hear me
Yeah.
always making references to technician on demand or Uber or people that are fundamentally changing the market. And I think somewhere in the background there's somebody just nutty enough, and you might be the one to say, okay, so if I'm going to rent equipment and I'm going to do a really good job at it, what else can I rent? Can I rent the operator? Can I fix the maintenance? I'm going to say rent the maintenance, but you understand what I mean. Can I come up with a guaranteed maintenance plan on it? Can I come up with a guaranteed operator for it? Can I really make it an on-demand service for an end user customer? I get it's a little out there, but the customer says, I need to dig a hole. It's this big by this big and this deep. And the dealership actually just literally supplies all the pieces to have that go out and get done. I mean, I think that's coming. And I think the other thing is, do you require, especially, and I think this plays into a rent hub question for you, Does it require a physical dealership? I mean, I know guys that run very successful businesses out of their trucks. And I'm not talking about backyard businesses. I'm talking about serious money dollar businesses, and they don't really have a physical presence. Yeah, they got a yard where equipment comes in and out, and they've got a shop where things get fixed. But fundamentally, can it be an online only business? Is this one of those things where, you call, we haul, or you call and we drop?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting on a lot of like worry topics for dealers right now. I'll answer the first question for you not even question, statement. You talked about products and services, and what's the future of rental look like there. And I don't think anybody in 1990 would have believed you if you said, in 2025 everyone's going to fly all over the world and trust locals to drive them wherever they're going. And the transaction's just going to be handled all digitally, right? No one takes cash with them anywhere, right? And all those things. So what will happen with the future there is to be determined. I think dealers have a legitimate worry today when they talk about, they're concerned over the OEM trying to cut them out of the middle and sell direct to the consumer, and then kind of make them a service shop. I think that's a legitimate concern. I think John Deere will be the first person poised to do that in the industry. I know Cat has looked at it, but the truth is, and every OEM dealer knows this in their heart of hearts,
Lenny Anderson.
They will never be successful the way that they want it to be, because you have to have the dealer with the relationship. If you don't hold the relationship, you lose to the team who has the brick and mortar. And you are correct, John, that you can run a business out of a truck. You can run a business. Those are hybrid models of existing models, right? You're not really revolutionizing. You're more or less streamlining. But something that I've always found with, if you want to own your market, you do have to have a flex. Nowadays, people are all about the image, more so than ever. And if you don't have that like social media flashy, you can roll up to the dealership and the dealership looks like $1 million and there's not that destination place to go where they can find you, that's a problem. And you're not going to get those big corporate customers because they can't see your infrastructure. And so, we're a little off topic with that statement because that's more like, dealer image and stuff. But I will say that I don't think that the brick and mortar of dealerships is going away anytime soon. If anything, the consolidation of dealerships, which we're seeing all over the place, where people are, if you're not growing, you're being acquired. If anything, we're going to see more brick and mortar, maybe less large shops, but more brick and mortar.
Okay. And at this point, I think that we probably do have to call time really quick on this, but I do want, for everybody that's attending online, thank you for your time, and hopefully this does work. Come on. We do have just literally 3 more slides on here. Michael, amongst all the other things he has done in the past, is also spearheading and creating, and has created this particular product. And I wanted to throw out a couple examples here of the specific rental department product called Rent Hub. And then lastly, leave off with just contact information so that if anybody wants more information, wants to throw out comments about the like, dislike, aside from the survey you're going to get, then please reach out, let us know whether you thought this was worth your time and or any other topics you want us to pursue in potentially.
Thank you, team.
Appreciate it. Everyone.
Thanks.